Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. Today I'm looking at the Behringer 2500 Multimode filter / Resonator module 1047. That's a bit of a mouthful. This is the second filter to come out of Behringer's take on the classic and vintage and unobtainably desirable ARP 2500. It's been really interesting reading up on the origins of this filter, what it was all about, where it came from. The ARP 2500 is of course a very revered, legendary machine that very few people get to play with, and it was built at a very different time and with very different emphasis. It was an engineering project and something very sciencey perhaps, rather than more musical. And that may mean that some of the modules that come out of the 2500 series seem perhaps a little bit different, a little bit quirky. They have a different emphasis that perhaps we don't really think about quite so much in these days of acid bass lines of big sweeps, because that's what we want from a filter. We want acid squelch and we want sweeps. That's kind of not what they were thinking of back in the 1970s. They were thinking more along the lines of synthesizing real instruments and sounds. But before we get too deeply into those sorts of thought processes, let's just have a quick blast of what we expect a filter to sound like in a very basic bassline kind of way, just to confirm that that's kind of exactly what this is. That sort of thing. We're familiar with that, so I can absolutely, first and foremost get out there the idea that the 1047, it's a decent sounding, squelchy filter in the way that we expect filters to sound. So there's nothing weird and crazy going on. It's not mystical in some kind of important, intelligent kind of way. It just does that filtering stuff. So we can all relax and enjoy it in that respect. But the 1047 also has its quirks. It has its interesting stuff in there, which we'll have a look at in a minute. I mean, first of all, it's got 4 outputs. It has 4 different filter modes, all of which are available simultaneously, and it was one of the first modules to ever do that. It has voltage control over both the resonance and the cutoff, twice over the cutoff. It has resonance limiting. It's got a fine tuning control and more actual resonance than I've ever seen in anything. So let me just take you through the basics then. Now, the Behringer version of the 1047 was designed by Rob Keeble of AM Synths and then manufactured by Behringer. Now, he's done a lot of work on converting the module into the Eurorack format that we see here, and that means that some compromises have come in. So, for instance, in the original module, there was 2 inputs. There was also 2 voltage controls over the resonance. So there was a lot more in and out in that weird ARP 2400 matrix system that they had for patching. To convert it to Eurorack, it needs to be simplified a little bit, and that perhaps brings the most important parameters a bit more to the surface and makes it less muddled and more focused, and that's no bad thing. So you have a single input here with a single input control. You've then got two voltage control inputs for the cutoff, which is here. So you've got two of them. So you could, for instance, modulate from a sine wave LFO coming into this one, while you've got an envelope going into that one, or two envelopes, whatever you like. It has this fine tune control, which does a smaller portion than the coarse control. It's sort of treating it like an oscillator, which in some ways is interesting because it doesn't actually self-resonate. It doesn't like to self-resonate. It tries not to self-resonate, and so it doesn't really work as an oscillator in that way. However, you can do interesting things by pinging it and creating strange pitch-based percussion sounds. We'll come on to all of that. But the fine-tune knob, honestly, is not something that I ever touch. I'm very happy fiddling around with the main one. You then got resonance, which goes from a little bit to all the way to heaven and back. It's just nuts, this thing. And then you have a center frequency knob for the notch filter, which is one of the outputs down here. Notch, band pass, low pass, high pass. And you've also got a CV input on the resonance control, which is something you didn't have on the filter module, their other filter module, the 10006. Over here you've got an LED that lights up. I think it's an overload light. Look, there it goes when I push up the resonance too much, which you would kind of imagine should be red, but it's green. So green makes you think, yeah, that's good, as opposed to trying to go, oh my goodness, I'm now overloading it. So that is something that flashes a lot, as you can tell. And there's also this kind of strange limiting circuit here, which you can put in if the resonance is getting too much. If it's getting too big, you can stick that in and it will calm it down. However, what really tends to happen is that it just kills it. It kills it to almost nothing. So I'm not entirely sure of the usefulness of that switch. But again, that's something that we'll look at. So that's the general idea. And so probably what's best at this point is for me to run some stuff through it, and let's see how it sounds. So let's just do some sweeps. I've got a sawtooth wave coming out of my Honor oscillator. There we go, a nice clean looking sawtooth. So with the resonance all the way down, just coming out of the low pass filter, which is honestly, I'm all about the low pass. I mean, we'll look at the other modes, but you know, I'm probably going to focus on low pass just because that's what I enjoy listening to. Let's add in some resonance, just go up to number 1. You can already see that pushing on the waveform. Only on 4, right? The numbers go around to 256. This is number 4. I'm going to go all the way around to 16. See that overload light coming on? Down to 64. let's go all the way around to the top. Ouch. You can use the fine to tune in those harmonics, the bits that are resonating. I guess that's its usage. Now, as this is really overloading, you'd think that if I hit the limiter, that would help. It doesn't, it just kind of kills it. Okay, let's move on to the high pass. Just bring this back to a sensible level like 4. Band pass. Let's open it up a little bit. And notch. Now essentially, if you push the centre frequency over to the right, it becomes a high pass, over to the left it sort of becomes a low pass. So that's the basics. What I'm going to do now is just sort of jam different things in and see where we get to. Just have a bit of a play for the next while and see what sort of sounds I can pull out of it. Maybe some long sounds, some short sounds. I'll put some drums through it and just kind of see what sort of mess I can make of it. interesting, isn't it? You know, there's all sorts of resonance going on. There's all sorts of harmonics being pushed, often into overloads, often into distortion, which isn't always nice distortion. It's rattling my speakers. I'm not entirely sure what it's doing to yours, but it has a very different vibe, you know, to something, for instance, like the British Noise Engineering Grit, which I reviewed just the other day. It's a very different filter. The Grit has lots of saturation and distortion in it that overloads and pushes itself into this really, you know, sumptuous, meaty grrr of a sound. The 1047 doesn't do that. It likes resonance very, very much, but it doesn't push it into a nice place of distortion. It doesn't fold it back on itself. It just kind of hangs with it, which, you know, can cause you some problems. It might not be quite the vibe or throb that you're after, but the potential for wide ranging of sounds, of filtering, of sculpting, yeah, I mean, that's really all there. I mean, I guess what I keep thinking about is how this was built as a precision piece of engineering. It's designed really for audio analysis. It's designed to try to synthesize natural sounds, to create a bell sound or a pipe sound or a string sound. That was the kind of thing they were going for in the early 70s with synthesizers, was trying to replicate actual sounds. And so to do that, they would be pushing harmonics, changing the harmonic content of the sawtooth that's being pumped into it. And you definitely get a sense of that. But it makes it, I mean, I started using the fine tune knob. Did you see that? As I was trying to tune those harmonics into the drone that was underneath. See, that got quite interesting. See, you know, it knows more than I do, and I'm already starting to discover new things to do with it. The drums going through it, that seemed to be largely a waste of time, although it did highlight how it starts to ring out, and you get this ringing going on where when you've got a sound source going through, not necessarily a synthesizer. And that brings me to another quick thing to look at. Sorry about the lawnmowers. You know, it's sunny outside. What can you do? I'm just going to press on. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the ability to ping the filter. This is something I've not done before. I don't think it's a function of any of the other filters that I have, so I found this quite interesting. What you do is you take the CV and gate or trigger from a keyboard and use that to push the filter into self-oscillation. Just kind of briefly. Let me show you what I mean. So, apparently this works best on band pass, so I'm going to stick that in there. So I'm going to take the pitch output from the keyboard, plug that into the voltage control over the cutoff, and then I'm going to take the gate output because that's kind of all I have, and plug that into the input. It gives us this ping. And all that's going in is I'm getting a very high voltage going in when I'm gating it, and that's enough to trigger, I suppose, the filter to excite it, and then it rings out and decays away. Apparently if you get this absolutely in the right spot, you can get it to decay for quite a long time. I'm obviously not getting that point. There we go. Now ideally what you need going in here is a trigger rather than a gate. The problem with the gate is that you it twangs it twice. You get the gate coming on, pings it, and then the gate coming off also pings it. So if you try to hit a note quickly, it sort of gets a double thing. I've got a cockerel going on now as well. It's just how things are in the countryside, alright? I can't keep apologising for it. I just have to keep going. We're going to have some jets fly over in a minute, and then a helicopter coming over from the oil rigs. It's just all go, you know. And it's nearly lunchtime, so maybe I should just be knocking this on the head. Bring the resonance down and you get a much shorter. Now my understanding is that this is the sort of thing that's used to create the analog drum sounds, kick drums, toms, things like that you find in drum machines. And you can see how there's a hint of that there. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing enough to be able to craft that sort of sound, but I'm just kind of trying to give you a hint of what's possible. But without the excitation from the input, it won't resonate, it won't do it by itself. If I pull this out, it just goes away. No matter how high I put up the resonance, it doesn't go into self-oscillation. One other thing I thought of while I'm here is noise. If you put noise through it, you end up with, using this kind of idea, pitched noise. And that is 1 volt per octave, more or less. If I go all the way up, I do. So there you go. I think that's probably enough on the Behringer 2500 multimode filter / resonator module 1047. Does it sound like the ARP? I have no clue, because I have no idea what that sounds like. But as a filter in of itself, it's interesting. It has a sweetness to it and all of that resonance that you can push up into the ether and do interesting things with it. I've never really done with filters before. I'm kind of this kind of filter guy. You know, that's the kind of filter guy that I am, and it will do that and do that brilliantly and sweetly. It doesn't have the gooiness perhaps of the Jove, doesn't have the gnarliness of the grit, but it does a decent job, and for the price, I mean, it's quite extraordinary. I'm a little disappointed over the sort of the general build quality is lightweight and a bit kind of and I've already scratched the top of this knob here trying to take the flipping plastic film off, And so those things are a little bit disappointing. Still not really found a use for the limiting switch there, but hey, otherwise bags full of resonance in here, multi-mode output. So you've got things like a notch filter that I never used. The band pass, I'm starting to get into that. It has a real vibe by itself, and that's quite interesting. So it's not just another low pass filter. The amount of CV control you've got is excellent. So you can have oscillations going on, modulation going on while doing regular stuff as well. So, you know, just very simply sticking an AFO into the second one. And you've got, you know, the filter squelch that you're after while being moved around at the same time. You know, that's pretty awesome. I like that a lot. And because you've got attenuation, you can set exactly how much of that you want going on. And just like that, you know, it's a decent filter. It's quite wide, takes up a lot of HP, you know, more so perhaps than something simple like the Wasp. But, you know, there's a lot of controls, there's a lot of space to use them. It does a decent job. So there you are. No complaints really, particularly for the ridiculous price that it is. And I aim to do more reviews of more of the 2500 modules as they gradually eke their way out of Behringer Central. The oscillators apparently are on the way in a couple of months still. It's been a couple of months for a long time. But hopefully I do plan to get hold of a couple of those to try those out. To try to build what could well be a little 2500 system. I mean, it's never going to be that because the ARC 2500 is just different. It's a different form of modular. It's patched differently, and you're never going to properly replicate that in your rack, I don't think. But I don't also think that's important. I think these modules individually can be quite interesting. Some of them perhaps end up being a bit superfluous, a bit sort of, I don't even know how to use this thing in this context. But something like the 1047 filter fulfills your filter requirements and gives you other places to investigate, other things to look at, the pinging of the filter, strange resonances. It gives you a bit more to explore. It's not a regular run-of-the-mill thing, and that I think makes it interesting and even better value for money. So I hope that was helpful, and in the meantime, go and make some tunes.